What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast. My name's Kevin Valentin.
And I'm the other host of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro. Kev, let's get in the hood, my boy.
Uh, you know, nice relaxing weekend. Got to see the new Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie, hence the t-shirt. Shouting out my boy, anything Marvel. And just kind of relaxed, chilled at the crib, played a little bit of video games. What about you?
Nothing much. Just worked. About to go on vacation. I leave for vacation literally on Monday. So it's going to be a short night for me from Sunday into Monday morning. But like 9:30, the time out in Salt Lake, that's when I'll get to Utah. And then after that, we're going to Yellowstone and Glacier National Park up in Montana. So it should be pretty fun over the
Sounds like you
next.
have an eventful few weeks planned out.
Yeah, I think I leave tomorrow. Tomorrow's the 5th. And then I get back. I take a red eye on the 14th and get back on the morning of the 15th. So be gone for a little bit, but you know, obviously, I'll be gone, but we'll see how we'll be able to adjust doing the podcast over that time while I'm gone. And Kevin and I have some things planned. We'll see how well they work out over the next 10 days or so.
Yeah, we'll make it
But
work.
but we'll see what we'll be able to manage over that time. So, but in the meantime, we got plenty to go over. We have the NBA Finals, and I should mention the Stanley Cup are going simultaneously. We've reached the end of the respective seasons for both the NHL and the NBA. Uh, it's always a sad sight to see. It's always just something that you just hate to
It's
see come
bittersweet.
to fruition. Yeah, it's very bittersweet, but nonetheless, we've got some topics that we have to get to today. Kev, I'll let you have the floor from here when it comes to what we're going to go over.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, obviously, game two of the NBA Finals just finished up. The Miami Heat get the upset, and they steal one away from the Denver Nuggets by the score of 111 to 108. Very compelling game through and through. Denver went on some runs, Miami went on some runs, but overall, Miami gets to steal one on the road in the Mile High City, and they are headed back to Miami for game three that's going to be scheduled for Wednesday. So we have a lot to talk about with that game. Obviously, what Denver needed to do and did not, what Miami needed to do and what they did. It's just an overall, I believe this is going to be a good series. Henceforth, why I picked Miami to win game two. But again, neither here nor there. Then we are going to get into our game three predictions as to how we believe that game is going to transpire. Again, we're looking ahead because Kyle will be on vacation. We want to make sure that we're getting some content out there for the week. So we figure we'd give a prediction earlier on, and then we'll figure out how it goes from there. And then, of course, we're going to talk about a little bit of news in the NFL. Derrick Henry, supposedly, according to some reports, is contemplating the thought of retirement. We all know that Derrick Henry is arguably one of the most dominant forces we've ever seen in football at the running back position. And with that comes a lot of mileage, a lot of damage. He's had a couple of injuries. He had a surgery. So it's no surprise that his body is very taxed, battered, and bruised. Taxed, battered, and bruised. Look at me, bruised. I don't even know what the hell's happening. Um,
He's
so
definitely
it's
a
no,
brute on the field. There's no doubt about that.
well, exactly. You know what I mean? Like I feel like my mind was kind of just like trying to figure out what it wanted to say, and had a combination of words. I do that a lot. I mix words, I make them up. I get it from my dad.
Happens to the best of us, bro. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, there's no validity to it. It's a rumor that was confirmed by a beat reporter. So obviously Derek hasn't spoken on it, or at least we haven't seen anything that's been confirmed to say that he's officially considering it, or even if he even said that. But again, for the sake of that being put out into the media, Colin, I want to discuss what it could mean for the Titans, what it could mean for his career. Will he hang it up? Will he come back in 2 years after rest? I mean, who knows? So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then another news in the NFL is going to be the Miami, the Minnesota Vikings star tailback Dalvin Cook may be a free agent come this week. Rumors have been circling all offseason that Dalvin wanted to re-up on his contract. That did not happen. The Vikings were unable to find a tradable suitor. So from what we've understood and what reports are saying, it looks like Miami and the Buffalo Bills are the front runners to acquire Dalvin if he were to hit the free agent market. So we have a couple of things, two NBA topics, two NFL topics, but again, for the sake of the conversation, let's just dive right into it. Kyle, the NBA Finals is tied 1-1. It has been a compelling series thus far. Obviously, Miami struggled in game one, but they made it competitive in the end, and they carried that over into game two, stealing one in Denver. So I want to get your thoughts on game two as a whole, but are you necessarily impressed with how Miami responded to that game one loss?
Well, I think you have to be to a certain extent, just based off of the fact that in game one, it looked like, just from an overall team perspective, they just couldn't get into a rhythm consistently. You could look at the fact that Jimmy Butler in game one looked relatively passive compared to what we've seen him throughout most of their postseason run up until this point. In game one, Miami only had 2 free throw attempts as a team, which, Kev, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. If you're only getting 2 free throw attempts for the entire game, I'm not talking about a quarter, I'm talking about the entire game. That just tells me, from an aggression standpoint, that they were far too passive as a team. You got to be able to attack the rim. You have to make some sort of effort to get into the paint. They simply didn't do that in game one. In game two, they looked like a more aggressive team. They looked like a more confident team. And to me, just across the board, Miami looked to be in a much more better position from a competitive perspective than they did in game one. In game one, Kev, the stats really indicated this. Their 3-point shooters like Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, they all struggled in game one. Now, in game two, they all stepped up. Max Strus got off to a relatively good start. Duncan Robinson had a better overall game in this one, specifically with game two, than in game one. But Gabe Vincent was really the one that really stole the show for Miami. He was their leading scorer. He dropped 23 points in this game. And then they also got good contributions from Bam Adebayo. They also got good contributions really from the role players that failed to step up in game one. And to me, that was one of the biggest differences in this game specifically compared to game one. And on top of that, they made an effort to get to the free throw line. Okay, I don't remember specifically the amount of free throws that they attempted. I believe it was 20. I believe they made 18 out of 20 in this game, if I remember the stat correctly.
Yes.
Okay. So you multiplied your free throw attempts by a magnitude of 10. That by itself at least tells me that that was an adjustment that Eric Spoelstra and the coaching staff made, and I think the players even knew going into this game too, and it worked out tremendously for them. And to me, to kind of dive into the second half of this game, really, this was sort of a very evenly matched game. Denver got off to a relatively good start in the first half. They got a pretty sizable lead in the first half, but Miami was able to chip away at it. But that fourth quarter, in my mind, is really where Miami took control of this game. Duncan Robinson got off to a very hot start at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Jimmy Butler was able to knock down some crucial shots, I'd say about halfway through that fourth quarter. And then Denver came with this huge push, really, I'd say within the last 2 minutes of the game. And Bam was able to get some crucial free throws to get it back to a 5-point game. Granted, Denver was able to get it back to a 3-point game. And then on the ensuing possession, Miami had a chance to extend their lead. They failed to do that. And they played just good enough defense against Jamal to be able to at least contest that 3-point shot to tie the game, to send it into overtime. Jamal misses the shot, and Miami is going back home for game three with the series tied 1-1. So to me, it's a huge win for Miami. And Kev, this is something that I think that Miami has been able to achieve pretty much throughout the entire playoff run that they've had. When they've been on the road in every single playoff matchup that they've had, the first 2 games that they've had have always been on the road, because that's what you get when you're the 8 seed. They've always been able to steal one. And they did it here again. And as far as I see it, that was their objective going into the first 2 games in Denver. They have accomplished that goal. They have now swung home court back in their advantage. And with games 3 and 4 back in Miami, they have a chance to potentially go up 3-1 in the series. Now, granted, I do think that Denver's still going to be a competitive team, and they have a very good chance to steal one in Miami as well. But just from a Miami perspective, they did exactly what they needed to do. Overall, I thought this was just a better cohesive unit effort from what we saw in game one. In game one, they could not hit a 3-point shot to save their life, did not attack the paint, or the rim in really any sizable fashion. They completely flipped the script in this one. All the role players really stepped up. Jimmy had a good game. Bam had a good game as well, especially with those late game free throws. And they played good enough defense to be able to win this game when it mattered the most by just contesting that Jamal Murray 3 when it mattered the most. But I will say the one adjustment that they're probably going to have to make is not allowing Jokic to pop off. Jokic dropped over 40 points in this game. So I think going into game 3, Spoelstra is going to try to slow him down in any sort of capacity just because Jokic drops 40 points, 41 points. You got to play somewhat better defense against him. Granted, Jokic is probably the best player in the NBA right now. That goes without saying. And it's very difficult to be able to maintain something like that to under 30 points as it is. But nonetheless, I think Miami can hold their head high knowing that this series is going back to Miami 1-1 apiece. And really, this finals is in their hands with home court for the next 2 games. I'll just leave it at that.
The game went better than expected. I know that I picked Miami to win, and I know that Denver made a game of it later in that fourth quarter, but this is why I will die on this hill and say that hard work will always beat talent. And I'm not saying that Denver doesn't work hard, but for those that said that this was going to be a sweep, for those that said Miami had no chance, granted, Denver can end up going down and winning the next 3 in a row, but both of these games have been competitive. The Miami Heat may not have a 2-time MVP, one of the best point guards in the conference, a very skilled and deep, a very skilled and deep team like the Denver Nuggets do, but they have the heart for it. They have the vocal leader in Jimmy Butler. They have the Hall of Fame head coach in Erik Spoelstra, or should I say future Hall of Fame. And that does a lot. They made the adjustments that Kyle and I both said they needed to make. They started Kevin Love. They went bigger to start the game, so those early runs with Aaron Gordon did not happen. And Miami jumped out to a quick start with Max Strus getting 12 points in the first quarter. Huge difference from 0. Massive difference. Denver then goes on a run. Shout out to my boy AJ Morales. He was on this podcast a couple years ago, and obviously, constantly in my messages talking to me about things we can improve and discuss, and what me and Kyle should do or have done. So again, shout out to AJ because he said this since the day I met him. Basketball is a game of runs, and that was the definition of this game. Because like I said, Miami came out and was firing on all cylinders. Denver responded. Then Miami goes on another small run. Then Denver blows it open by double digits. Miami claws into it within 7 or 8 points to go into half. Denver takes the lead. Miami crawls back. Miami goes on like a 15 to whatever run in the fourth quarter. Denver goes on an 11-2 run to close out the fourth quarter before it ends. And Miami holds on. I mean, when you look at the box score, like quarter to quarter, outside of the second quarter and the fourth, because Miami had that big explosion in the fourth quarter with Duncan Robinson going off for an 8-0 run on his own, it was 26-23 in favor of Miami at the end of 1. It was 25-34 in favor of Denver in the second quarter, 24-26 in favor of Denver, and then 36-25 in favor of Miami. It really was back and forth all game long, and that's what you want in an NBA Finals. And that is in huge part to Jimmy Butler being more aggressive. Jimmy Butler may have taken some ill-timed shots, made some shots a little bit more difficult than they needed to be, fading away, taking a contested jump shot, rather than taking the floater. But when you look at what everybody was able to contribute, this is what you need for Miami, because this is how they've been winning games. Like Kyle said, this is how they've been able to steal one game from the home team. You got 21 from Jimmy, 21 from Bam, 23 from Gabe, 14 from Strus, 10 from freaking Duncan Robinson. Kyle Lowry had 9, but those 9 points were critical because I think he went to the free throw line in the fourth quarter after being fouled on a 3 by KCP, and then he was able to also knock down another 3 in that quarter as well. So when you really think about it, they may have been 9 points, but those 9 points were very, very timely points. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying the Miami Heat did everything we needed them to do. Adjusted from the three-point line, adjusted from the lineup, and dispersing the minutes at the power forward and center position, because you have to have bodies rotating outside to make sure that Bam doesn't get into foul trouble when guarding Nikola Jokic. But at the same time, the Denver Nuggets bench played exceptionally well because I believe they went on a 25-6 run without Nikola Jokic on the floor with their bench players. And at that point, it looked like Miami was going to get routed in the second quarter, to which, again, that's why Denver won that quarter 34-25. But Miami closed out that quarter and made it a single point lead. They cut it down from like, I don't know, I think it got up to like 13, 14 points, maybe even higher. And they cut it down to like 7 or 8.
I think at
And that,
halftime it was a 6-point deficit for Miami, so they really kind of cut into that lead before
but that's
halftime.
why I always say they're so well coached. People always talk about, oh, you guys are just repeating what you hear on SportsCenter, or you guys are just reading what people are talking about on Twitter. We're all saying the same thing because it's not hard to see. You have a great coach, you have good players, and you have one person that's kind of sparking everybody to be better. That's why Jimmy Butler is who he is and why he's so well respected. I don't need to have a PhD in sports analysis to understand that Spo has these guys ready to go. And if people aren't performing, next man up off the bench. Dude, they played 10 players today. That's pretty deep, if you ask me. And Spo has everybody on a tight schedule, on a tight ship, ready to go when needed. Jersey number called upon when needed. Ty Smith had 18 minutes last game. He only played 6, but they didn't need him this game. Then you go out and you give Duncan Robinson good minutes. Obviously, Cody Zeller gave 8 minutes. Kevin Love, thankfully, was able to come out and play 22 minutes. He didn't play a single minute the last game. So adjustments were made. The Heat come out on top. They shot effectively from the field. Yes, Nikola Jokic dropped 41 points, but he was not able to capitalize on that triple-double. He was not able to get other players as involved. And those role players for Denver did not perform very well either. 12 for Aaron Gordon, 5 for Michael Porter Jr., 6 for KCP. Jamal Murray didn't have the worst game in the world, but he didn't have the usual Jamal Murray game. He only had 18 points. And then, Jeff Green had 9. Bruce Brown had 11. Chris Braun had 6, and he went on a small run of his own, I believe, somewhere in the third quarter to where he was actually exploding, making plays, chasing down loose balls. So I expect this series to continue to be this competitive. It's headed back to Miami, and I'm looking forward to it.
I think for me, one of the takeaways, just focusing on Denver here, and Kev, this isn't a segment question. This is just a general question that I have for you. How concerning is it to see Denver's role players like Michael Porter Jr. and KCP only combine for 11 points in this game? Because, Kev, we have watched both of these guys with KCP and Michael Porter Jr. When these guys get on a hot streak, these guys can light it up and combine for potentially 30 to 35 points just between the two of them. And with the series going back to Miami for games 3 and 4, how concerning is that to you, just from a Denver perspective, with their lack of effectiveness, especially with what we saw in game 2?
I'm not going to go out on a limb and say it's 100% concerning. I will say it's something to monitor. If it persists, Miami's going to run away with this series relatively quickly because you need players like Michael Porter and KCP to step up. KCP a little bit more because he is known to be that 3-and-D kind of player. He's going to go out there and guard somebody like a Jimmy Butler, like a Kyle Lowry, or whoever is that's hottest from the field. I saw him step up and try to guard Duncan Robinson at one point in the fourth because Duncan was just, again, he went on an 8-0 run by himself in the fourth quarter because he was just able to hit shots and get to the free throw line. But he also had 5 fouls in KCP. Usually an aggressive physical defender like that can get into situations, but I mean, even the commentators talked about it. It was very surprising to see him be undisciplined like he was. He's always available. He's always ready to go. He's kind of like an Iron Man in the league. He's always ready to play no matter the circumstance, no matter what injury he's going through. He's going to put himself forward on the court and put his team first. So for him to be out of sorts like that, it was very out of character. So I don't think he's going to have another game like that. And if he does, I mean, I guess Eric Spoelstra is just attacking him to get him off the floor because of the impact that he provides when he is consistently shooting from behind the arc. We all know the impact he has defensively. So if he's got it going on both sides, it is very difficult to slow him down. But Michael Porter Jr. to me has been an issue for the last couple of series. I mean, I've said it a couple weeks ago. He is up and down, to say the least. Streaky is another word. I mean, inconsistent. I don't understand when you're 6'10" and all you do is shoot behind the arc. It kind of furthers Kyle and I's point of this league is just going into a softer era. I mean, last I checked, if your matchup is 5 to 6 inches shorter than you, which in this case is Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy's like 6'6", 6'7", you have a couple. Put him in the post. Find a way to get a mismatch on the pick and roll. Run that with Yoke. Do what you have to. But instead, out of his 8 shot attempts, he shoots 6 threes. When it's not falling for you behind the arc, I say this about every shooter, or every player, should I say, because I tell Luka this all the time, and not personally. I tell Kyle this about Luka, should I say. And that is, if it's not falling, get to the basket, put your head down, and get to the free throw line. When you see the ball go in from the free throw line, that might give you a different kind of perspective, a different kind of momentum, a different kind of sense of, I saw one go in, I can do this now. Instead, you're just going to continue to jack shit up. We know that you're efficient from the field from your career, from behind the 3-point line. We understand that you are a sharpshooter, but you're hurting your team if that's all you're going to do. You're going to go out there, get some cardio, maybe a block shot or two, some rebounds, but offensively, if all you're going to do is jack up threes, I don't necessarily see you as a valuable piece. You are taller than the entire starting lineup of the Miami Heat because Bam Adebayo, I think, is like 6'9", and he plays the center. Kevin Love's like 6'9", 6'8", plays the power forward. You're taller than their starting. Why are you not on the block? Why are you not attacking the paint? Why are you not at the free throw line? Michael Porter Jr. has always been a big question mark for me. So to answer your question specifically, KCP, I think he'll be fine. I think he'll adjust. Again, with him being in foul trouble, that threw everything off. But when it comes to Michael Porter Jr., he's got to step up way more consistently. I know he had 14 points last game or whatever it was, but that wasn't exactly an efficient night. And him going 2 of 11 from the 3-point line. So if this shooting streak continues and this is an issue, I think that this will give Miami more incentive to let him shoot because shoot or shoot, right? But if you're struggling like that and you're young and this is your first finals appearance, this may be in your head. And at that point, it may be too much for them to overcome.
And just one final point about game 2 in particular. I thought Miami, they improved, honestly, miles better from what they did in game 1 behind the 3-point line. And I think just like we talked about, I think the overall aggressiveness that they brought to the table in game 2 really stood out compared to what we saw in game 1. Look, maybe in game 1, they were still getting used to the altitude. They had just gotten to Denver, I think 2 days prior before game 1 was played. I know Caleb Martin has been dealing with flu-like symptoms over the last couple of days, and I imagine for him specifically, that's not something that you really want to go through when you're a mile high up in Denver to begin with. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me to see him relatively struggling compared to what we've seen from him over, I'd say, the last 2 weeks or so, because he was really pivotal in that series against Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals. But he's relatively struggled in this series. We'll see if he bounces back going into game 3. But I mean, really, just the last point that I'll make, Miami's not a team that is just going to roll over because they lost one game. They showed up, and granted, they took some punches from Denver. Denver went, like you said, Kev, on multiple runs throughout this game, and Miami was able to withstand those punches from Denver and make punches of their own to really get on some crucial runs. And then when they needed it the most, they were able to cash in on some clutch buckets, whether it came from the field itself or from the free throw line. And to me, that's something that I think we'll focus on going into game 3 and to transition going into game 3. With this series now tied 1-1 apiece, these next 2 games are absolutely pivotal for both the Nuggets and the Heat. The Heat will have home court advantage for the next 2 games. Games 3 and 4 are in Miami. So if Miami plays their cards right, they could potentially go up 3-1 in this series. And with Denver being the road team, home court is not in their favor here after they lost game 2. And going on the road, they do have a chance to be able to steal 1, potentially 2 in Miami. But knowing how Miami has played at home, that will be a tough challenge, but not impossible. We have seen teams in the past go into Miami and be able to win on the road in the, I believe it's called the Kaseya Center now. It's gone through so many changes over the last couple of years. I think it's the Kaseya Center. But nonetheless, let's dive into game 3. That game will take place on Wednesday. So, Kev, to kick this one to you, how do you see game 3 playing out between the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets when this game takes place on Wednesday?
This is going to be a tough battle. This is going to be a hard-fought war in this series, right? It's tied at 1 apiece. Miami went out and stole one. It's what they've been able to do all post-series. It's kind of their MO, kind of make their presence felt within the first 2 games. So when they're on their home floor, they have a little bit less stress, a little bit less of a worry. They did what they needed to do. It's not tied, or excuse me, they're not down 2-0. Or should I say 0-2? Jimmy Butler needs to find a way to bring back a little bit of the essence he had in the first 2 rounds. He hasn't exactly been himself. His numbers are significantly down. I don't know if it's because of the little nagging injuries. I don't know if it's because he's exhausted from the previous series. But Jimmy has to go back to being the alpha and saying, hey, I got to put the ball down on the floor and I got to get to the free throw line. I think if they continue the shooting stroke that they displayed in game 2, this is going to be a very, very good outing for the Heat. They've also made adjustments defensively to where that zone has taken away the pick and roll of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic to where now it's forcing Nikola to have to put the ball on the floor a lot more and get to the basket of his own accord, which, to be honest, isn't exactly too difficult because not many, if any, can guard him. I don't think anybody can, but especially in Miami when they're undersized and they have no traditional big, like actual center. Henceforth, why he had 41 points tonight, but he only had 4 assists. I'm not going to sit here and say that, you got to pick your poison with Jokic. Do you want a 28-point triple-double or do you want him to go for 40? Obviously, at the end of the day, you don't want either of those, but you have to make a choice as to which you prefer. If everybody's involved, everybody's hot, and Nikola has almost 30 points, it is damn near hard to stop. But if one person, similar to like LeBron James, and a lot of people have noticed this over the years, let Bron go for his 35-40, even if he has to go for 45. You have to limit the passing lanes. You have to make sure that his teammates aren't in a rhythm. Because after you close out on Bron and start to get that double team, other players have to start to touch the rock. Other players have to make shots. In this case, Nikola Jokic was able to get the ball out to other people. They just weren't knocking down those shots, and or another pass was made because Miami was able to adjust because of said zone. So Denver's got to find a way to combat that zone, find pockets, make some floaters, get to the free throw line, and limit turnovers. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Denver had a pretty significant total of turnovers today to where it was a little alarming as opposed to game 1. They had 13. Miami had 11, but there were some timely turnovers to where it looked like Denver was kind of slipping, and that is, I will say, in that fourth quarter run that Miami had made to start the fourth quarter, there was a turnover or 2. Duncan went on that run, and Miami found a way to continue to adjust on the defensive end. I'm not going to go out and say Denver needs to win this game because it is too early in the series. But if Miami starts to get the momentum that they have gotten in other series, it may be a cause for panic because a team like this, I was telling Kyle this actually as the game had ended or right after the game ended, you cannot look at Miami and say, oh, they're an 8 seed. They're done. They are the last team to make the play in. Denver's going to sweep. They suck. They shouldn't be here. They're here, and they're here for a reason. You give a team that has nothing to lose the will to win, they are going to find a way somehow, some way. If this series were to go 7 games and come down to a game winner from one or the other, I wouldn't be surprised because Miami's not playing like an 8 seed. And if you're still calling them an 8 seed, you're not watching the same games we are. They've already beaten the number 1 seeded Bucks. The surging Knicks led by Jalen Brunson. The Celtics, who were favorites by a mile to win that series and go back to the finals and arguably win the NBA championship. They've already defied the odds. They're here for a reason. So prediction-wise, I don't necessarily know who I can go with. I made a bold prediction saying that Miami was going to win this game. So I'm going to double down. I think Miami takes a commanding 2-1 lead in this series with them being home and a couple of other players gaining confidence. Hopefully Caleb Martin can feel a little bit better. They're getting Tyler Hero back. They have every reason to win this game. Now for Denver, they're going to have to get those role players involved a lot more. Jamal Murray's going to have to find a way to knock some shots down, see the ball go through the rim. Michael Porter Jr., same for him. KCP's got to stay out of foul trouble. And that bench has to continue to play strong because when Nikola Jokic comes out the game, normally in most cases, Denver typically slips a little bit offensively. That wasn't the case today. If their 3-man rotation off that bench combined for Brown, because I think Chris spells it Brown. He spells it Braun, but he pronounces it Brown. So both Browns and Jeff Green, if they can continue to produce the way that they have been, I think that this is going to be a competitive game. Denver shot the lights out from behind from behind the 3-point line. At one point, it looked like they couldn't miss in the third quarter. They're going to have to have. They are going to have to. They are going to have to find a way to run Miami off the 3-point line and get them to close in and attack the basket. If that's the case, maybe they can draw some charges. Maybe they can force some turnovers. Maybe some errant passes. I don't know, but Miami cannot afford to shoot at an efficient clip the way that they did in game 2. They have to repeat what they did in game 1. Get the ball out of Jimmy's hands and force other people to beat you. That's going to be how they win. You got to hope that Tyler Hero has a very, very struggling, slumpy, slow start to where he shoots them out of the game and kind of gets Denver in transition to where they were really, really good today. I think at halftime, I think that their transition points or breakdowns were like 16-3 in favor of Denver. So get out in transition, force some turnovers, and make other players beat you. But I personally believe Miami would take a 2-1 the series lead.
Kevin, I'm honestly kind of split on this one because I could realistically see scenarios where both teams can win this game. But I think I'm going to side with you on this one. I think I'm going to pick the Miami Heat as well. I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw in game 2 with it being a competitive game. I don't know if it's going to play exactly as it did in game 2, but nonetheless, I think Miami is going to be able to do enough just to get over the hump and take this series to a 2-1 series lead in their advantage after game 3 is complete. For me, this game, when it comes to game 3 in particular, when it comes to Miami, I'll start with them since they won game 2 back in Denver. They have to continue the success that they saw from their role players in game 2 because really when you look back at the game 1, guys like Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, and Caleb Martin, I don't want to say that they were no-shows. Maybe with Max Strus you could say that because he literally didn't score any points. But you can tell that when you look at game 1 and compare it to game 2, you're talking about a night and day difference. You definitely saw Max Strus get off to a hot start. You saw not only players like Gabe Vincent really shine, but you also saw Duncan Robinson come up with pivotal moments for Miami in game 2 and give the Heat momentum, especially when they needed it in that fourth quarter, when by and large in that game 2, it was a game of runs back and forth for both teams. And I do think that that element of runs will be apparent in game 3 as well, because I wouldn't be surprised if Denver's going on the road. I imagine they probably want to start hot. They want to try to get out to an early lead and try to make Miami work back to try to win that game, but keep them at distance if they can. And when it comes to Miami, being able to replicate the same success that they had in game 2 is going to be tricky because Denver's going to make adjustments. And I will say that when you look at game 2 compared to game 1, Miami was far more effective in game 2 behind the 3-point line than in game 1. And I think Denver will make a proper adjustment to that. And it's going to come down to whether or not that Eric Spoelstra can make the proper adjustments to get Miami's 3-point specialists like Max, Duncan. We'll see what happens with Caleb. I know he's dealing with flu-like symptoms. Hopefully he returns to better health just for Miami's sake, because they definitely need him to be viable going into game 3. If that's the case, hopefully it works out for them in that case. But if he isn't, they're going to have to look for other contributors. They could look towards Kevin Love. They could look to Kyle Lowry to be able to fill the gap, per se. And then maybe you see guys like Gabe really kind of come through and shine for Miami behind the 3-point line. So to me, when it comes to Miami, they have to be able to focus on maintaining that consistency behind the 3-point line. And when it comes to Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, I would say keep bringing what they brought in game 2. Because in game 2, Jimmy was far more aggressive. Because in game 1, he looked rather passive. And it could have just been him feeling out the game, trying to get other guys involved. But Jimmy is clearly the number 1 player on Miami. He needs to play like it. And he definitely did that in game 2. There's no doubt about that. He wasn't the leading scorer, but he opened up opportunities for guys to be able to execute, and he was able to do that effectively. Bam, I thought, was able to continue the success that he had from game one going into game two. And that's what they're definitely going to need going into game three. And especially when you're dealing with somebody like Jokic on the other side of the court. It's not an easy ask. I would say Bam is, from just a length perspective or just a height perspective, there's definitely a disadvantage there, but he's been doing his best. But, you're dealing with Jokic. Jokic has dropped 41 points. Obviously, I know Miami's going to make some sort of an adjustment to that because they can't allow Jokic to get on a roll like that because he's probably the best player in the league, depending on who you ask. So, when it comes to Miami, continue what they are doing offensively. I think defensively, stick with what you got unless Denver really makes some adjustment offensively that really gives them a look and they have to kind of switch rotations. They have to switch looks. Then you have to make an adjustment in game for that. But overall, I would say Miami wins a very close game in this one. I think it can play out somewhat similar to game three. There will be some minor differences when it just comes to the runs that we could see from each respective team. But I think that Miami's in a good place here. And I will say, just to point out Denver here for a second, Denver can go out here and win this game. If they get more effective shooting from Michael Porter Jr., KCP, then they could win this game on the road in Miami. And if Jokic and Jamal Murray play up to their standard, they could definitely make that happen. Especially Jamal. Jamal was averaging over 30 points a game against the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. He's only averaging around 22 points per game. They're definitely going to need him to step up in game three because he just hasn't been as effective in this series compared to some of the series that we've seen previous when it comes to him specifically. So Denver definitely has some room for improvement. And this is an opportunity for them to take advantage of potentially going back up in this series with game three. I don't think that will happen, though. I think they will fall short in that regard. But I'm going to pick Miami. I'm going to side with Kevin on this one. And I do believe the Heat, with all of those factors combined, will take a 2-1 series lead with game three taking place on Wednesday.
I'm excited to see what Mike Malone has for his adjustments because we saw what Spo did. It was blatantly obvious. Needed to go big, needed to hit shots, needed to attack the basket, get to the free throw line. Obvious, basic basketball things. But you can't critique Denver outside of missed shots. They played good defensively. They responded to everything Miami threw at them. Your best player goes for damn near 50 points. Yes, your running mate went for 18 as opposed to 25 or 30, what he's been giving you, but that's not going to happen every single game. Every good player has a bad game here and again, and you can't really say it was a bad game because he shot a little bit better than 50% with 7 of 15. It's you know what I mean? Like a little bit less than 50%, excuse me. But it wasn't like he had 8 turnovers like Jaylen Brown. It wasn't like somebody was injured. It wasn't like the team went on an absolute atrocious missing spree like the Houston Rockets did in 2018, 2019, whatever year that was when they missed like an NBA record 28 threes. It's just Miami held out longer. I think that they just need to be a little bit more disciplined with the ball and also find a way to keep your playmakers on the floor during meaningful times. KCP with foul trouble, obviously Michael Porter Jr.'s inconsistencies on the offensive end. Find ways to get people involved, and I think that they'll be just fine. I'm picking with my brain because I believe Tyler Hero will add a different dimension to this team outside of just someone who's going to be able to shoot the ball like a Max Strus. Gabe Vincent has been a great ball handler. Caleb Martin's been a little sick the last few days, but again, another ball handler. You add a third ball handler that can come off of the bench and provide a spark if the other shooters are off. You can ease him back into this rotation to where you don't need him immediately. You're not down 0-2. Tyler doesn't need to give you 30 points, 25 points, 10, 15 points. I'm thinking maybe 15 minutes off the bench, 20 minutes, depending on what Spo thinks. It's all dependent upon what the supporting cast of the Miami Heat do. But not to just blend this all into all about Miami, I think Denver's in a prime position to steal one in Miami as well. You still have Jokic. Jamal Murray's going to take that game personally to say, I didn't play well enough. I think this is going to be necessary. I just don't have a lot of faith in Michael Porter Jr. So that is a big reason why I picked Miami, because I don't know if he's going to be able to get it together. I can't rely on him. He'll pop off in games that are irrelevant, but it's the NBA Finals. There are no irrelevant games. So we'll see what happens, but
I,
it's gonna be a good game.
I just want to make one final point, and this is kind of the conundrum that Denver, I think, has experienced over the first two games of the series. Kev, when it came to Denver in game two, I don't think we could look at shooting from the field as an issue. They shot
No,
52% from the field. Now, behind the 3-point line, they improved their stat from game one to game two. It's just, to me, the issue that they were dealing with is that they were giving up buckets on the
yeah,
other end.
defense.
And even though that Miami struggled in game one behind the 3-point line, they actually shot better than Denver in game one.
Yeah, about
Denver
what,
shot
12%, something like that?
like Denver shot 29% in game one.
Miami was like
Miami shot
33.
33. But that was one of the takeaways, is that Miami really struggled behind the 3-point line in game one. And one of the overlooked aspects of game one was Denver's inability to hit threes in that game, but it didn't really matter because they ended up winning that game by 10 plus points. But in game two, Miami shot what? It was like 40 some percent behind the 3-point line. I forget if it was in the
48.
mid. I thought it was in the higher 40s. I was thinking like 44 or 45,
48,
but I thought.
6, almost 49.
And when you actually look at the difference when it comes to the amount of threes that Miami made compared to Denver, I believe it was a +6 advantage. Because I think Miami hit 17 threes and Denver only hit 11.
Yeah.
So to me, that goes to show there's 18 points right there. There's an 18-point difference right there. And obviously, you're talking about a 3-point game. You could also look at the fact that Denver missed 3 free throws in this game as well. That could have helped out Denver tremendously.
Yep, Miami missed 2, so you can go on and off of the what ifs.
But nonetheless, to me, the conundrum that I think Denver has experienced is the fact that they are just not getting key contributions from guys like Michael Porter Jr. and you could probably throw in KCP, because their bench has not been their issue. Their bench has actually been playing very well. But when it comes to the role players, especially within that starting five, I can't really blame Aaron Gordon throughout this series so far. Aaron Gordon has been very solid throughout this series. He had that
playing
great
great
run.
defense on Jimmy Butler, running in transition, rebounding the basketball. Like, he's doing everything he needs to do.
Jokic has been clearly the best player for Denver in the first two games so far. It's not even close. And I would say that Jamal has been somewhat of a disappointment in this series so far. I'm not saying that he's been like trash. I'm not saying that he's been awful throughout this series, but you just compare him to what he has been, especially when you compare him to what he was in that Western Conference Finals series against the Lakers. He's averaging 10 less points a game in this series compared to the Western Conference Finals. It's like I said, he's not playing terrible. He's not like shooting like 1 of 10 from the field. He's not only scoring 7 to 8 points. It's not that bad. It's just that it's Jamal Murray.
He's not living to the expectations he set himself, the bar he set himself through this postseason. He's falling short.
It doesn't take me to tell Jamal that he knows that he could play better. He knows that.
Yeah.
It's just that he has to go out there and be able to execute. It is kind of unfortunate that he had that open opportunity at the end of the fourth quarter and just ended up missing that shot by literally, I would say, about 6 inches. Because it was actually a good look by him with that shot that could have potentially sent it to overtime. But unfortunately just missed it. So to me, Denver, like you said, Kev, has a very good opportunity to go on the road and be able to steal one, whether it's in game 3 or game 4. And I am actually inclined to believe that they will steal one. It's just I don't believe it'll be this game. I probably more banking on the fact that it'll come in game 4 when their backs are really up against the wall. But nonetheless, we will leave the NBA Finals to the side. We are going to transition to some NFL topics at hand here. The first one is going to be Derrick Henry. Now, Kevin talked about it at the top of the episode. Derrick Henry, supposedly, this is just a rumor that has been floating around. We don't really know what the veracity or really the strength of this rumor is, but there's been enough information floating around on social media that there's a possibility that Derrick Henry could be mulling retirement just based off the fact of the workload that he sustained over the last couple of years, simply just because Tennessee really focuses on running the ball heavily through Derrick Henry. And I mean, it's no secret, Derrick Henry is one of the best running backs that we've seen over the last 5 to 6 years. He's been an absolute beast. But you could definitely tell that workload has been slowly creeping up to him. He's been dealing with some more injuries over the last couple of years compared to the first couple of years of his career. And I'll let Kev speak for himself when it comes to how we should look at these rumors when it comes to Derek potentially, or I shouldn't say potentially, possibly mulling retirement. So, Kev, to kick this one to you, what do you make of the Derek Henry retirement rumors that have been floating around on social media the last couple days?
As an AFC South rival of the Tennessee Titans, I couldn't be happier. If he were to hang it up, I'd be thrilled. Not that Tennessee is going to go out there and give us a run for their money like they have been in the past, just because they've been falling apart as of recent history, not able to really close games out. Derek's unavailability, inconsistencies at the quarterback position. Defense has been solid but not convincing. I think Jackson was going to be our only competition this year, but neither here nor there, bias aside. What Derrick Henry means to this team is incomprehensible, immeasurable. I mean, any other adjective that goes along with those words is exactly what I'm talking about because, like Kyle said, they are solely dependent upon running the football. There are times where Derrick Henry touches the ball 30 to 35 times. There's times where they'll give it to him every single down, including fourth, on one drive. In one sequence, within 10 yards, they'll give it to him 4 straight times. He has accumulated a multitude of mileage similar to a vehicle because when you're having 25 to 30 attempts per game in a 16, now 17 game season, including the postseason, or not including the postseason, dude, that's absolutely absurd. The man is exhausted. We haven't seen touches like that since the early 90s. I mean, maybe even the 2000s. Consistently, players getting that many touches. Of course, if it's a favorable matchup with like the league's lowest rush defense or something like that, of course you don't need to throw the ball because you know for a fact they can't stop the run. But Tennessee became a one-trick pony. I mean, there were games where Derrick Henry's getting 25 attempts and only ends up with 50 yards, despite the opposing team knowing that's all they can do. And Tennessee wasn't able to change the verdict. Now, I don't want to say that that's all Mike Vrabel's fault, but low-key it kind of is. You're the head coach. You put too much on his body. He's already abnormally large for his position. I mean, 6'4", 250 or 60 pounds, whatever the hell he is. Yes, he can run. Yes, he's agile. Yes, he's been durable outside of that surgery, but he's getting older, tired. His body's got a lot told and taxed on it, and I just don't know how much longer he can last. And a lot of players in this generation have been conscious enough to think maybe I should put my body ahead of what it is that I want. Like mentally, I can still play, but physically, I'm deteriorating. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't an option to retire. It was like, yo, I got to feed my family. Like, I want to do this forever as long as I can until my kneecap falls off. If Derek can walk away unscathed, and I don't want to say unscathed to the fullest of the definition because he played in the NFL for almost 10 years at this point, and there is no person that plays the running back position more traditional than he does at this point. And if he can walk away without a major career-risking injury, life-threatening injury, I think that that's wise so that he can be with his family. Again, as a Colts fan, I would be ecstatic, but the league will miss him. He's fun to watch. He is electric. He's a game changer. He's dynamic. There were rumors even circulating before the draft that Philly tried to trade for him, and it was almost close that the Eagles almost got Derrick Henry, and that would have just absolutely been ludicrous to have Derrick Henry and Jalen Hurts on the same fucking team, but that's neither here nor there. Derrick Henry has every right to walk away from this game, especially with what he has contributed for the Tennessee Titans. It's just unfortunate they weren't able to capitalize and get to a Super Bowl, but hey, man, this is what happens when you beat up your workhorse and they get older. Time will tell. Brady's the only one so far that's been able to beat time, but he wasn't a running back, so we'll see what happens. I mean, with Tennessee falling apart as of late, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this is something he actually mulled over because he doesn't want to rebuild or start over. But yeah, I have no idea what to think other than, it was a pleasure competing against him from a fan standpoint. Like the Titan and Colts battles that we've had, they haven't really been many battles because he's killed us. But it was always nice to see somebody talented kill us. It wasn't like a no-name practice squad player. It was somebody you knew that you needed to fear. and we couldn't stop him. So if you do hang it up, Derek, hats off to you on an incredible career. If not, we'll see you this season. Give me a ring, man. Let me know if you want to retire. Be in full support if you need to.
Well, for me, I'm actually not really dead set believing these rumors. I actually am fully expecting Derrick Henry to start day one this season for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, me too.
For me, something would have to really pop up here that would really change my mind on this. Something significant would have to change my mind on this one. He'd have to sustain some sort of injury or something catastrophic would really have to happen. To what extent, to how it would happen, I don't really know. It would mostly be pertained to an injury. Now, Kev, he sustained that foot injury back in 2021, correct?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
When he came back for the playoffs, yeah.
Do you remember specifically what that foot injury was?
I think he broke his
required
toe or
surgery?
something like that. I think it was a toe or an ankle, one of those two.
Because he was out for what, 8 weeks? The end of
8 to 10 weeks because he came back for the wild card game against the Bengals.
And anytime that you're dealing with any sort of foot issue, especially when it's at the running back position, that's always something that's going to be a cause for concern. But Kev, I got to be honest with you. Last year he had his second largest amount of touches in his NFL career, year by year, and he still ran for over 1,500 yards. Still had over 10 touchdowns. Like, I don't see him necessarily slowing down. Now, I do see hindrances with just these injuries being more prevalent or having the potential of becoming more prevalent, especially now that he's transitioning into his 30s. But when it comes to these retirement rumors, I don't believe them. I think he's going to be ready game one for the Titans. And to me, as long as he doesn't really sustain any sort of major injury, I think he has a very good chance to go out there and average somewhere in between 1,400 to 1,600 yards on the ground, knowing how much that Tennessee runs the ball. He is their focal piece of their offense. And unless something dramatic happens or something significant happens when it comes to an injury, I think that Derek still has good years in the NFL left. I could see him playing for another 2-3 years. It just depends on how he really handles these next couple of years in the NFL, and if he's able to dodge major injuries, because he's going to get nicks and dings. Everybody gets nicks and dings in the NFL. It's just how well are you able to brush those off and be able to play in an effective manner. To me, the foot injury is a big one, but it looks like he's been able to stabilize that, knowing how well he played last year. Granted, it didn't result in Tennessee going far, but nonetheless, I think he's going to be fine as long as he doesn't sustain some sort of injury. So when it comes to these rumors about him mulling retirement, I think they're kind of BS, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yep, time will tell. But, again, if he retires, I guarantee you I'll be the first one to say I am not mad. So I digress.
One less headache in the AFC South, right?
Correct. I've had enough headaches in my life when it comes to that football team. So him retiring would be a nice little gift for me. Nice little birthday present if he wanted to do that.
Well, don't put it past the Colts to give you headaches. They do that quite consistently.
They do more than probably some of these. They do it on bye weeks. They do it on bye weeks. So let's get into our final topic in the NFL, and that is going to be another NFL superstar in Dalvin Cook. Minnesota Vikings star wanted a contract extension, wasn't able to get it. Minnesota is worried about, I guess, his injury history and his availability, so they tried to trade him. Couldn't find a suitor. There were rumors that Miami targeted him. There were rumors that Buffalo wanted him. Those rumors still exist, but from a free agent standpoint, as the Minnesota Vikings, if they were to cut in or release him, they would only suffer an $8 million dead cap hit, to which I think they'd be willing to live with, as opposed to what's remaining on his contract as of right this moment. So, Kyle, to kick this one your way, with Dalvin Cook potentially looming in free agency, what are your thoughts on the two teams that are intrigued on getting him and the likelihood that he lands in either of those spots?
Well, for me, when it comes to Dalvin, I think that Dalvin is still an effectively good running back in the NFL. Now, granted, I would say over the last couple of years that injuries have been something of note when it comes to Dalvin's ability to play on Sundays. But when it comes to some teams that could potentially pursue him if he were to be released by the Minnesota Vikings, some of the reports that I've seen with teams that are potentially pursuing him are the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. Now, both of these teams reside in the AFC East. So when it comes to what Dalvin could offer to them, you're getting a pretty good running back. Dalvin has the ability to not only run the ball extremely effectively on the ground, but he is extremely vital in the passing game. I know when it comes to Minnesota, they kind of vary who they have in the passing game when it comes to their running back core, because sometimes they'll feature Dalvin, sometimes they'll feature Alex Madison. Both of these guys in that role can be very effective because we've seen Dalvin Cook multiple times in the past be utilized on screenplays. And if he's able to break a couple tackles, he could break off 30, 35. We've even seen him break off 50 to 60, 70-yard screenplays that end up in touchdowns. So when it comes to what I think Buffalo and Miami could potentially utilize him if he were to get released, with Buffalo, it'd be very interesting to see him in that role just because, I'm just going to be honest here, Buffalo doesn't really utilize their run game that often. And if they do, a lot of times it's Josh Allen running the ball. Just because they've had running backs recently that are pretty decent options. They've had guys like Zach Moss, Devin Singletary. They have Dalvin Cook's brother, James Cook, in the fold for the running back core. And yet it just seems when it comes to the Bills' offensive strategy, they are more inclined to give Josh the ball and being able to run the ball with their quarterback instead of running the ball in a traditional sense where Josh would just hand it off to the running back and they'd probably run the ball, let's say 20 to 25 times a game in that capacity. That's not really Buffalo's style. It's just that Josh really leads the way on offense. And the running back committee that they run in Buffalo is secondary. And to say it's secondary is kind of putting it mildly. So it'd be very weird to see how Dalvin could potentially fit if he were to be released in Buffalo, but he'd be on a great offense and surrounded by guys like Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox and Gabriel Davis. I can't forget Gabriel Davis as well. That's quite a potent offense potentially for what Buffalo could field if they were to pursue him. And that would, like I said, include the possibility of him getting released by Minnesota, which does look like it's about to happen. And when it comes to Miami, I think Miami could benefit more from Dalvin Cook's services, simply just because I think it would really provide a stable number one running back in that offense. Now, when it comes to how Miami would run their offense, the biggest thing that comes with Miami is they got to make sure that they are able to run an effective offense with Tua and whoever's in the running back. And I wouldn't be surprised that we actually see more of an emphasis on the running game from Miami this year to take some of the pressure off of Tua, just because Tua has been getting killed in the pocket where he sustained multiple injuries last year via concussions, where people were really considering that Tua should contemplate retirement. And he was even asked those questions this offseason. He was asked those questions, I'd say about a month ago, or if not a month and a half ago at this point. So maybe one of the adjustments that Miami makes this offseason is pursue Dalvin Cook at a really stable number one back. And I would say kind of pull some tricks that Minnesota was able to effectively use with Dalvin in the fold. Utilize him in the screen game. Get him at least, I'd say, 15 to 20. If you want to go towards 25 touches, if the game plan just decides to go that way, go for it. But in my mind, Dalvin is an extremely effective running back still in the NFL. Now, Dalvin could end up on a different team potentially than the two teams that I just discussed. I'm only bringing up those two teams just based off of a report that I've seen with teams that would be interested in pursuing him if he were to become available. I imagine that Dalvin's candidate pool would actually be quite larger, just because even though that he would get, a pretty decent contract wherever he would go, there's a huge upside with Dalvin. I would say that Dalvin at this point is legitimately a top 5 running back in the NFL. And I know that the injury history is something that is a little bit concerning when it comes to Dalvin, but I think when you look at the risk reward aspect here, I definitely believe that, for the right price, he could definitely bring you some solid rewards for whatever team ends up signing him if he were to be released by Minnesota. And when it comes to Minnesota, this is the team that has held on to Dalvin for years at this point, and no wonder. I mean, Dalvin's been great for them throughout his tenure. It looks like to me that they're going to fully transition into Alex Madison being their number 1 running back. And, those are going to be big shoes to fill just because Dalvin has been their lead back for so long. And I don't know if Alex is going to be able to step up to that degree. But nonetheless, if that's how it has to be, then Alex is going to get an increased workload and he's going to have to prove himself going into next year. And like I said, that's not going to be easy just because Dalvin's shoes are going to be very difficult to fill. But overall, it's going to be very interesting to see how Dalvin's situation plays out over the next couple of days, because it looks like it's all but certain that he will be released by the Vikings. But don't be surprised if some other teams really go after Dalvin over the next couple of weeks, not just including the teams that I mentioned with the Bills and the Dolphins. I think that Dalvin will get plenty of attention for some free agent suitors this offseason if he were to be released later this week.
I had to start with, I agree with Kyle completely in the sense of Dalvin Cook is 100% a top 5 running back. The negative connotation is his health. He tore his ACL. He's had a couple of various injuries, including his shoulder as of the last couple of years, to where there have been constant check-ins with the Vikings medical staff. He played through that injured shoulder. He chose not to go the surgical route. He's healing up fine through rehab and physical therapy. Everything is going great. My issue is you already have enough problems with Miami if they were to go out and get him with Tua Tagovailoa and his health. You already have Raheem Mostert, another checkered injured person, or another checkered hit. Excuse me. Words are so difficult today, and I apologize for all these mistakes. It's just making it worse for me mentally. I apologize again. You already have to deal with a checkered injury past that is Raheem Mostert in that running back room. So if you do sign him, do you cut Mostert? Do you let go of Jeff Wilson? Do you let go of Gaskin? There's a lot of options here, right? There's a lot of looming narratives that are going to be here. You trade an injured running back for another injured running back. I'm not saying that, Raheem Mostert is on the same level as Dalvin Cook, but when you talk about upgrading, you need to have an upgrade more than just what he's able to put on the field. Is he going to be available? Is he going to be able to stay on the field? The money that he's going to ask for, do you have the cap space for that? You just traded for Jalen Ramsey. Tua's going to be up for an extension after this season. You picked up his 5th year, but all right, what happens after that? Do you give him a supermax? Do you give him a max extension? Do you give him a 2-year gamble window, a prove it deal? I don't know. You have a lot of players that are currently getting a lot of money on this staff. Tyreek Hill, Waddle's going to be up for an extension as well. There's a whole lot of things that go into Miami. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be a good fit because it would tie them to Dalvin Cook potentially for 2-3 years, because he's not going to do a 1-year prove-it deal. He knows his services are going to be needed by somebody, and he's going to go to whoever's going to give him the longest deal, because running backs don't have long windows. You got to go while the iron's hot, and if someone's willing to pay you 3-4 years, you take it where you can get it. So I don't know what Miami's going to do. I agree offensively, he does fit their scheme because you have the 2 fastest receivers in the league, because you have an up-and-coming growing defense that just got one of the best, arguably the best corner in football to go alongside with Xavier Howard. You do have one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the league when healthy in Tua Tagovailoa, and one of the more brilliant offensive minds in Mike McDaniels from a coach perspective. So, yes, the possibilities are endless with what you can do with a dynamic back like Dalvin Cook. But again, that injury history is something that you need to pay attention to. From a Buffalo standpoint, Kyle already went down the points. I'm not going to drag that back out. The fact that they don't utilize what they already have and his brother's already on that team, you take reps away from him. You already got rid of Zach Moss. Singletary didn't come back. It would make sense, but the offensive scheme just doesn't fit. Dalvin needs to get the ball anywhere from 20 to 25 times to really be effective. Yes, he's a great pass catching back as well, but you got to worry about the injury history. Is Dalvin going to want to go? Is Dalvin going to want to play in the cold weather that is Buffalo? Granted, Minnesota is just as cold, but they have a dome. Why would you not want to go to Miami, Sunshine State, get to play in the most tropical state, one of the most illustrious states when it comes to taxes and what money you're able to save? I just personally, I just don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if a dark horse team came out of nowhere. It would be kind of cool. I mean, we saw Christian McCaffrey go to San Francisco when San Francisco had a great dynamic duo with Jeff Wilson and Elijah Mitchell, and they went out and pulled the trigger and got Christian. Granted, Jeff Wilson ended up getting traded to Miami, but all I'm saying is there are always random teams that come out of nowhere that go after players you just don't expect. It's the NFL. Rumors may circulate, conversations may circulate, speculation may circulate, but you just never really know. Again, I really think he's going to commit to a team that's going to commit to him long term because he knows that his time is running out, especially with these injuries. So let's monitor where he goes. Let's pay attention to what we think about. Obviously, it seems to be a pretty done deal from the Minnesota side that they are going to let him go and part ways. But I told Kyle before we hit the record button, it's the NFL. You never know. They could end up striking a deal 10 minutes before he's estimated to be cut. We've seen press conferences moved. We've seen statements changed. We've seen head coaches say that, like we're going to move on or, like we don't know what we're going to do without him or, we're just kind of focused on football. And before you know it, the players re-signed later that day, if not the next day. So until he's officially let go, I would say that his looming free agency is going to be interesting. But the two teams that we talked about, each of them have their own issues, so I don't necessarily know where he would best fit. So we'll kind of just play it by ear.
Yeah, it just, really just to kind of wrap it up, I think Dalvin, wherever he goes, and that's assuming that he were to be released by the Vikings, I imagine that there would be a pretty sizable candidate pool just because it's like what I said earlier. When you balance that risk versus reward ratio, right there, I think it comes with the idea with the right price that he could definitely provide some pretty solid rewards no matter where he goes. So I think when it comes to the teams that could be interested in him, I think it's going to be more than just teams like the Dolphins and the Bills. But time will tell, and we have to see if that first shoe were to drop, and that first shoe being he were to be released by the Vikings, which has not happened yet. But based on what a lot of NFL reporters like Adam Schefter and even some of the beat reporters within the Vikings themselves has essentially said that it's pretty much a done deal that Dalvin's going to be on the way out this week. It'll just be very interesting to see how this whole scenario plays out, this whole situation plays out.
It's true. But Kyle, that's going to wrap it up for us. It's a little late on our side. I know you got to get ready to catch a flight soon or head to the airport soon, should I say. So let's close this one on out. Guys, it's going to be a weird next couple of days. Like Kyle said, he's going on vacation, rightfully so. The man busts his ass every day. Let him enjoy himself. So you're going to be dealing with me, maybe a couple of trickle-in segments as the weeks progress. Obviously, Kyle and I will do our best to kind of have our combined joint segments. But again, time will tell. Signal availability, obviously the available data roaming area with him traveling all across the West Coast, or should I say mountain, right?
Northwest.
Montana's mountain.
Northwest. You can just say the
Yeah.
Northwest.
So we'll play it by ear, but thank you guys for the support. We've seen numbers kind of trending up and down on YouTube. We're doing what we can. Obviously, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, everything's going well on those platforms, growing every day. So we're handling the obstacles that we've been presented, and we're making the best of it. We still enjoy what we do, and we're coming up to that lull point in sports where it's going to be a very long summer of just a lot of baseball and speculation in the NFL. But we'll see what happens as the months progress. But again, we appreciate any and all support that we've received.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that this NBA Finals tends to go longer, just because if this series were to potentially go 6 games, I would be back to be able to record on the 15th. So hopefully Miami or Denver, I should say, don't wrap this up within game 5. I'm not hoping for that because I would like to have some sort of thoughts uh, on how the NBA Finals would play out when we do reach its conclusion. But like Kev said, time will tell, and we'll just kind of play it by ear. We'll do what we can over the next couple of days. Stay tuned. Just kind of be patient with us. Um, you know, kind of just do the best that we can, and we'll manage it. But just kind of manage expectations over the next couple of days as we try to put out as much content as we can for you guys. But with that said, you guys, once again, thank you guys for tuning in. Whether it's on YouTube or the audio platforms, we definitely appreciate your support. Hopefully, it continues throughout the rest of the NBA Finals and into the summer months and then into the fall months as well. But Kev, I've got nothing more to add. You can close this on out, brother.
All right, guys, have an incredible week. We will see you guys later, and appreciate the support.
Take it easy, you guys.